It looks like folks are trickling in. Welcome, welcome. Let me share my screen. Hello. Welcome to our panel, The Blueprint, How Healthcare Organizations Craft Design Systems. And we're going to give folks a couple of minutes to join the webinar from their prior meetings or other conflicts. But in the meantime, if you want to say hi to everybody in the chat and share where you're from, it's always fun to see where folks are coming from around the world. And we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. Looks like someone's tuning in. Bobby from Austin. Hey, Corey from Chicago. We're all from Redmond. Nashville. Well, thank you all for joining us. I think we can get started. So welcome again to our panel, The Blueprint, How Healthcare Organizations Craft Design Systems. I'm Jocelyn, the head of community at Supernova, and Supernova helps connect your design and engineering data in a design system software so your entire organization can build products faster. But before we jump into the panel, a few quick housekeeping items. So this webinar is currently recorded and will be shared with everyone who registered via email later this week. You can also turn on automated captions if you'd like, and please feel free to chat with other participants in the chat and share your thoughts. More folks are currently sharing where they're located and saying hi. But if you have any questions for our panelists, please use the Q&A function in Zoom so that we don't lose your question. We'll be saving some time at the very end of the panel for audience questions. And feel free to review those at any time as well, because you can upvote. And we'll probably go through the ones with the most votes. But today we are joined by an incredible lineup of design system experts to talk about how healthcare organizations craft design systems. So we'll be chatting about how the healthcare industry, its laws and regulations impact and influence the way teams build and implement these design systems. So let's get started with a round of introductions. If you could share a little bit about yourself, including your name, pronouns, where you currently work, and how long you've been working in design systems. If we can start with Cameron and go in alphabetical order to Krizia and then Lee, that'd be awesome. Kicking it over to you, Cameron.
Hi, so my name is Cameron Roberson, he, him. My title is Manager User Experience at Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Louisiana. Our team is not only responsible for the design system here at Blue Cross Blue Shield Louisiana, but also all parts of the visual journey of our members, our providers, and our producers and brokers. Myself, I've been in design and marketing and advertising for about 15 years now, and more closely related to design systems for about the past 5.
Hi, okay, I can go next. Krizia Fernando. I'm a lead product designer at Evernorth, Cigna. And I've been in the design system space for about 6 years to 7 years now. Prior to Cigna, another healthcare company, and then prior to that, an IoT multinational company. So I'd say I'm more of a design system design expert in the past few years. And in our team, we are an enterprise design system. It supports I would say three big brands within the Cigna group. So we're kind of, we're a lean team that supports everybody, like all the engineers and designers who use a design system. So happy to be here.
Lee Wells, nice to meet you all. I'm Associate Director of Enterprise Design Standards at Humana right now. Been through a couple different, areas of Humana in terms of interaction design and managing some different programs and such. They have a lot of different, programs and areas there, but now kind of more of a global enterprise position and team. I have been around design, human factors, interaction design, UX, any of that for a little over, 16, 17 years. Design systems specifically, though, probably, the past 4 years or so, specific to systems itself.
Well, just realized I was muted. Awesome. It was so great to meet you all. And thank you so much for joining. Before we dive in, I know you already kind of started doing this, but I think it'd be really helpful for folks to get more context around the design systems you all are working on and who your main consumer is, who that end user is. I know some folks have mentioned like patients, brokers, things like that. So I think it'd be helpful for folks to kind of understand the full landscape of what the systems you're creating are serving. And then there's also, the folks building with their design system, but who are the folks building with their design system building for?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about ours. So our design system, since we're a mid-sized organization, our design team has to handle all of our different types of customers. And that obviously that's our members, our customers there. We also have to provide for our providers, the doctors that work with us, brokers and sellers of our insurance. And our design system has to support all those different use cases through different portals and different digital properties that all have very different needs. At a base level, there are some things that are common amongst them all, and that's what the design system is there to do. But it also has to be able to be flexible to understand what those individual users' needs are, which are vastly different. A member is coming for information about their healthcare, their plan. They've got a very urgent need, whereas a provider may be coming to check eligibility or something like that. And what that user flow looks like is going to be very different, but the design system that we have has to be able to account for that. And another big part of our design system is not just the visual part, is we have a content component as well. Using clear language is just of such importance here. So we try to strive for not only having a clear visual language, but that the actual language that we use is clear and consistent across all of those experiences.
Yep, I would say that we're right on board there. We are a centralized standards team. So in the past, over the years of being at Humana, we've had a centralized design organization where all designers reported up, under one or two people, but all the designers as of right now report to different programs. So that's important thinking about the design system itself. We not only have multiple programs and thousands of pages you could think of out there, but also multiple lines of business or businesses within Humana Inc. as a whole, that larger umbrella. So Centerwell Pharmacy being one of those. So when we think about our design system, really, of course, anything that's being created out of it is for members, potential members, providers such as that. But what our real customer is, of course, is those different design groups, right? Those different program groups, the designers within, and also the developers and QA within those different groups. One of the things that's cool, and maybe we'll get to a little bit later about our design system, is that we have the visual sides of things, Figma design libraries, all those different variables that allow for changes between theming for maybe one business segment versus another, but also reusable development components, right? Code snippets that would equate to a header, a footer, a hero, a button, different things like that, all the way granularly granularly down to spacing, radii of edges, things like that. So I'm saying that because those are the pieces of our design system that we make sure are consistent enough and on brand enough for any of those different areas to consume, but yet, just like Cameron said, flexible enough to be used in multiple situations and for multiple programs.
And for Evernorth and Cigna, I mean, obviously it's a big kind of sub-brands within the Cigna group. So our end users fall within different family of brands, right? So we have healthcare service providers, employer health benefits, pharmacy benefit management. You could think of like, we're jumping between B2B, B2C. So it's like even those two could be different in terms of the execution of your patterns, right? The way you would design a marketing page versus, a utilitarian product page that's more of like admin view, right? So you could think of the vast layers of, the way that design is implemented today, right? You have researchers, you have designers, you have content strategists, you have accessibility partners. So there's a lot of cross-discipline touch points there that, on a day-to-day we support on top of, we support our pillar designers too. So from our end, we sit under a chief design officer. And, within that, we have what's called an aesthetics and architecture. So our team is actually, an internal product that serve the platform strategy, right? So we have, as with any micro front end architecture, your design system is typically the UI layer of that platform. So we're not only design, we're even interfacing with our engineering partners a lot. So even with that, we're huge in scope, and then we actually work with tons of different partners and teams. I think it's very important to really, one, show that value across the org so that teams and products leverage the design system to be able to influence those teams. So let me not go off topic, but I know we have a lot to talk through.
For sure. I think value is always such a key part of getting resourced for any organization doing anything. But healthcare, we're in the United States, so I'll speak specifically to that, has become more and more digitized in the past few years, especially with that shift to electronic records. I want to say that was like a decade ago, and the introduction of e-visits, especially as that has gotten, video visits have become more popular during the pandemic, quarantines and things like that. So I'm curious, like, what role has design systems played in this transformation? How has that shift to digitization affected design systems and the work that y'all have done?
I can go first. I think since I talked through the platform strategy, right, and kind of like the micro front end architecture, for us, the data strategy is separate from the design strategy. So in that way, it's already a quick win if you're buying into this, design systems as a service, right, within your organization. There's a way that you could manage that so that we don't have to use patient information in our flows, right? So, and obviously, I don't want to push it back to like the designers of all of the products. Like the product designers are usually the ones that are like, okay, every time we create our flows, make sure we're not using real data. I would say that, I think not because we're healthcare, but because with any platform strategy, this is like kind of a plus that you separate the data side of it from the design side. My quick 2 cents there.
Yeah, I agree with that. Go ahead,
Go
Lee.
for it, Cameron. Oh, all right. So I'll give you 2 quick ones that come to mind. First off is just thinking about things going digital. To us, it might seem like we've been in the digital world forever, right? A lot of us who work in it, but coming into, Humana and healthcare, even only like, 7+ years ago, so much things were still print, right? And we're still sent through the mail, we're still call in. And so, just seeing that change over the years and helping people from a design standpoint understand digital, right? Understand what does digital mean in terms of, branding and color palette and voice versus where we were only so many years ago. And also thinking about mobile, right? And the digital landscape and how just again, in that amount of years, research shows, the large jump in older population using mobile devices, tablets, things like that. So being able to utilize your system, right, in your design system to, number one, account for those digital needs to make sure brand shows up, make sure accessibility shows up, and make sure that those different areas such as marketing and such that were really heavy on print or TV or just face to face are able to have great resources for digital. And then also the other quick one is when you're talking about so many things going to digital, right? That also means, I think, for all of us, so many different areas in our businesses trying to create now, trying to just create a front door, trying to create an advertisement. Hey, read this and then come in through this way, click here. And so having that system allows, I think, for more areas to build more quickly, rather than having to really come up to speed and start from scratch and things like that.
Yeah, I'll add to what Lee and Krizia said that what it really does is it provides you the framework to work from a design standpoint, because in many ways, especially what we're seeing on our side is that digitization is still very much happening. We have a lot of things that are still paper forms that still get mailed in, and constantly we're working to bring more of those into our digital spaces and give users the ability to do that digitally, self-serve that. And one of the ways a design system can help enable that is just to make it faster. If you've already got that common design language that a product manager and a product team can work from, that limits the load on that team, because, really what's that's doing is now you can focus more on making sure to get the data right. And if you've got the visual picture right, then you can make sure that the data you're bringing over is matched the correct way and everything is handled. So you really speed the whole process up because you've answered one of the big questions already.
Yeah, and you all have mentioned a couple of different things like accessibility, ease of use, helping folks work fast, like get things through faster. What would you say is the most important principle to keep in mind when building and maintaining design systems for healthcare orgs? If it comes down to choosing one thing or another, what's that one thing you go back to? Like, this is the main thing that we are prioritizing, whether that's like security, data security, regulations, accessibility. So many different things are important, but what's that most important principle for you all?
I have a
think
bias
nuts.
around this.
Go for it.
Sorry. I have a bias around this. Only because when you think of accessibility, you also think about empathy with your users. You also think about ease of use. So basically, accessibility is the core of usability, right? So I would say in human-centric principles, like that's very important, but obviously security and privacy, that's a given. Like you can't mess with that. I think that, with the current climate, that's, you can't be too vulnerable for security. But for me, I think with us, and what I see from a design system scope of work, we see this day to day, like we can't even ship any component that's not accessible. So we could even see that by default, design systems should always prioritize accessibility. We have a component health that has accessibility review as a swim lane. We have, partners that are, there's like informal groups right now that try to like set up annotation tools and accessibility linting tools to help scale up the effort of, hey, all designers should know how to use, how to design with accessibility in mind. So from a design system point of view, I think accessibility is what makes sense. It's just very close to our work.
Yeah, and I'll say, I like to wrap all of that together in saying, designing with intentionality. In the world of health insurance, nothing is really easy or clear, and it's complicated even to those of us who work in it day in and day out. So we have to keep that in mind as we design our interfaces, because that friction is a given. When users are coming to us, they're coming to solve a problem. We don't want our systems to be a barrier. We want to enable them to get the information they need so they feel comfortable about that very large decision that they have to make. So we need to be direct and intentional and surface that functionality with as little effort as required, using that clear, accessible language and styles. And I think that's, security and privacy gets wrapped up into that. But, because to your point, like accessibility really is so important because, we can't do anything without having that. And in a lot of cases, it's at the design system point is where people are really thinking about that, because of, a product manager has what they have to worry about. A developer or an architect has got their swim lanes, and security and regulations fall into those. But accessibility, I think, really does fall to the design team, and we have to keep that 508 compliance or WCAG, whatever standard you're striving for, in mind, because that's what the design system needs to accommodate for.
Yep, I'm 100% aligned with that. Accessibility to me is the top, not only because legally it's the top, for what we have to put out, but also just because it's not always, about truly disabled individuals, right? There's so many levels of accessibility, even for just the, average aging individual, that can not only benefit them, but benefit a lot of people. Yeah, accessibility and what we design and thinking about that. I mean, it's so important that our accessibility lead sits on on my team, on the enterprise design standards team. So, having them help out with training for different individuals for different program areas, from development to program management to designers at our company. And then also having them help anything that we create, right, that we put into our design system that's consumable by other areas of the company, making sure that that's, accessible, and that we've thought that through, and any variations hit that too. I think also, to me, what we've seen also is just, you think about the journey of somebody from a potential member to a member to coming back, daily, or for filling prescriptions, anything you can think of. The ease of use and navigation also, you don't want to lose somebody, right? And you don't want to have somebody go from one experience to another experience because they needed to do something in a different segment. And that's where I think design systems have really helped as well. If you can try to provide that consistency of interaction, of navigation, even if the theming, or, if the look is a little different moving between areas, you still have that core that's consistent, right? So that member, that user, can really feel comfortable being with in your whole atmosphere, right? In everywhere that they move through on their journey with your company. So I think that that's a big one too: ease of use and navigation.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that, because it makes me think about, our experiences for our members is, we have a lot of vendors that provide a lot of services in addition to the ones that we build ourselves. And those interfaces are supplied by others, and we're maybe working with an external team to pull that together. So we've got to find that commonality between them all. So as you said, when that user's moving between, say, looking up claims information and then they need to go find a doctor, that may be a different platform, but we need to tie that together somehow and either find what's that common piece through the navigation, through the language used, so that when they move over to the other system, it's as frictionless as possible.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. When you are kind of connecting to other portals and other third parties, how do you connect those systems? Like, what tends to be the common ground, or does that really vary vendor to vendor or platform to platform?
It really can vary, and I think that's where you have to, foster a good relationship if you're the lead working with that vendor, to understand, what would they allow you to work with them on. Where can you find a common space? Like, a lot of times, colors and fonts are things that everyone can agree on and work around that. But putting your own user in front, and in a lot of cases that vendor will work with you on that, and you can find what other pieces, what other areas there may be tweaks that can be made, that you can tie things together. And maybe that's taking something that the vendor is doing and making it a part of what you do in some way, so that you make sure you find that that common platform to work from. And it can really vary, but it's really all about communication, communicating with them and understanding what they have and what you have.
And I think, to chime in on that, I think you were talking about a way to seamlessly provide, white labeling opportunities, right? Where in the brand theming, you kind of, for us, our experience in the last 2 years, especially when we started to convert most of our design systems into an enterprise design system, we strengthened our token architecture to ensure that it's going to be an easy workflow to theme across all these brands. So that was like our first mountain that we had to climb. Like in the beginning was token architecture is not just a jargon. It's actually what, makes you, it keeps you up at night to like think through and solution. And I think what has worked for our team is that we were able to figure out internally and align on our workflows, other than kind of like that most prized token architecture that's we're going to stand by this token architecture, and this is kind of, we all agree how this works and we know what tools work best with it. I think understanding that from a team level is one of the most successful, I would say, things that made us become more valuable as a team for other teams. Because, the more that you can document it well, the more you could teach it well to other teams. It's easier to show that value, and it's easier to get teams to keep using the design system.
Yep, I would agree with that. And I mean, it's just so many things going through my head right now of, like you said, things that keep you up at night. But of just how much goes into building a system. One of the cool things, and I won't go deep into this, but like we built our system from 7, 8 years ago when I got to Humana, saw the need for it, and we built it from the ground up, and to where we are today. And it's great where, again, the token system is really amazing, especially where we have to go across different software platforms. To be honest, I won't mention which ones we're using in different areas, but it's not always the same platform. The different teams are kind of building in different ways, third parties as well. So when we got to the point where we aligned on our token system and our packages and the naming, at least, even though values for different areas might be different per token, if you have the same naming convention for those tokens, then you can basically share them across areas and basically flip a switch, which is amazing, right? You can say, now you're looking like all greens for Humana, and we flip the switch and we have different font, radii, color palette for Centerwell Pharmacy, same components in some instances. So that's been really helpful. And then also aligning, with those third parties are just this past year plus our documentation for accessibility, for content, for design, all of that became externally shareable in a secure way. In the past, we had to, share off PDFs or here's where we are today, but we really took a big step and put a lot of effort into trying to make that center source within our company that everyone can go to for design resources, standards resources, content, brand, shareable to external third-party vendors. So it takes a little bit off of our shoulders to get that consistency, right? So now that they can have those kind of blueprints in front of them and build. And the last thing I'll say is one of the things we're also getting further along the path to, which I think would help anybody, is the main software system that we're using having reusable elements there, to where even if you're a third party, you're working with us, you get access to it. You can build pretty much white label, but within our guardrails, right? Within our standards, what you need, and modify it, tweak it a little bit, but be able to create from different global libraries that we've created in different areas. So again, all stemming from our core design standards and design resources. So that's been amazing alongside with tokens.
Yeah, I think building off of what keeps you up at night, related to design systems and healthcare, what are some other challenges that you all have faced in the last couple of years, related to healthcare and design systems? And also curious to hear, like, how have you overcome those?
I think as with any big corporations or organizations, there's always a limit to the resource that you can, right, like that you can use. So whether that's the number of developers and designers, that you can hire, or you know, if we can keep this product and legacy, or can we migrate it to the new rebranded look? Like, these are the biggest challenges, knowing what, you know, can be prioritized. And I think what has worked for us is, you know, first understand the scale at which you operate, right? And obviously that's, again, you only have a few people on your team, you know, you have, how can you prioritize it all? Understanding that scale and working with these adjacent teams very closely, especially their product leaders, and understanding if we work on this product, we're able to solve X amount of, you know, seamless kind of solutions, right? Like, and that will be a good kind of strategy. Somebody who's good at strategy can figure this out. And I think we're lucky in our team that we have really great leaders who recognize that design system can actually solve all of these complex problems. So it's the scale and the influence that you can make is what I would say the most challenging piece of being part of a team and doing design systems.
I think the bigger you are too, and I think all of us probably have seen this, the more cooks in the kitchen, right? And we're doing something that some people feel like, right, is putting them in a box. That's sometimes what we get, right? To say, oh, well, I'm a designer and I want to design, right? And you're giving me a system to design to. So not that that's always the biggest problem, and over the years it's gotten better, but there's just so many areas, and then third-party agencies outside of that, and you know, different programs, and they all have their timelines and what they need and new things they want to try. So trying to keep consistency, keep resources available that are really core and solid to those things we talked about, like navigation, you know, organization, things like that, brand accessibility, but then also allowing it to be living and breathing, right? Figuring out a way to allow programs to feel like they're a part of it so that they want to contribute to it, they want to use it, they want to help the system grow. That's what we've tried to do since we began with this system, to make sure designers don't feel like we're taking their job, right? We're putting you in a little box of tools and saying this is all you can use. That we're trying to say, here's these on for this reason, and help us to, you know, make variations where need be, help us to understand your needs so that we can grow holistically for the company, right? I think that's something that was a problem in the past and in other places too, where you grow in a silo and you get great things, but they're not available to everybody. And so I think to have a great enterprise level design system, you need to be thinking about how can A affect B and C and D in different programs. And, you know, if something is good and needs to be created for everybody, then make it available holistically through this design system versus in the past, again, where it was kind of siloed to that program.
Yeah, and both your experience is interesting because our organization is a little smaller, and we've actually moved all of our UX design resources into this one team, because not only is this team supporting the design system, but we also have to just support the needs of our dev teams. So the designers matrix out to these different product teams and provide the actual UI work. So at the same time where they're maintaining a design system, they're actually, you know, hands-on keyboards doing that work. So we kind of have to find the balance with prioritization between time spent that's, you know, building out new parts of the design system and fleshing things out a little bit further versus the actual work that needs to be done. But the benefit to that is, you know, since the designer that is working on the design system is also doing the work, they're also an advocate for the design system. So as they're working with the devs, they're showing the value of that design system. So it inherently builds the time into working the design system because they see like, okay, well, this just made us move a little quicker. We shaved a sprint off of this feature development. We shaved 2 sprints off because we had that work in place that we did before. So, you know, it does put the impetus on the designer to, you know, be that advocate. You know, that's something I think that always has to be kept in mind, that, you know, the work that you're doing with the teams also goes into your design system, and you have to put that forward to get full buy-in. And that's where you can find time to prioritize it. You know, that's how we've been able to find time to prioritize it, is by showing the value of the system.
I think slight pivot to, I guess, governance model, since all of you kind of touched on that. Cameron, it sounds like you have the design system maintained and built by also folks who are doing regular product development or product design. And Lee and Krizia, it sounds like you both have more centralized design system teams. I'm curious if you have contribution models where other folks can also plug in or, you know, pitch in other components or suggest components, or curious how that works for you all.
Yep. Contribution model, like I kind of mentioned there, in terms of allowing people to feel like they can contribute, right? If there's some variation of a component or an element that they need, if there's something new that they don't have, you know, our team is not huge, so our specific team, so we can definitely partner with them, partner with research to say, these different program areas could use something like this. Let's, test that and see where it can be. So yeah, we always try to have a very open contribution model, but also help teams through that understand what we already have, right? You're needing this, here's what we have, and here's how you could maybe use it. Maybe you didn't know that, or this variation that exists. So being there to help with that. And then also just, you can't have that without creating advocates. One of the great things that we did have is at some point we were centralized. So a lot of the designers that are spread out now, they still understand the design system and the purpose of it, and the benefit of it. So majority are champions of the of the system itself. So that helps a lot to get them to speak up and get them to be thinking about the system and how can it improve as we move forward.
For our team, I would consider us more of a hybrid, centralized, we're centralized hybrid, because we currently have each of a design system designers representing either brands, either you're part of, representing the mobile native platform team. Are you working with specific, large product teams that are, if you work with that flagship product, it helps identify use cases that are very usable by every other team. So for us, I think there's a 50-50 of, we kind of understand, and the well-documented patterns out there just need to be built first, and then we test them. We also actually work with UX researchers, partnership with, our UX engineers. There's a lot of partners to help get this contribution. I would say the contribution model can come even later, because I think a lot of teams do attend a session called our advocates meeting every week, where design champions do bring up issues and we talk about it informally, and then kind of bring in and solve those issues right there and then. So we're very much close to the team. It's nothing that needs to be more of a formal process. Go through here, like submit your issue. Right now, it's very much conversational and evidence-based. Like we hop on the call together, we go on Fig Jam and work it out, basically.
Yeah, since we're it's centralized into one team, it does make it easier for us to share ideas across the team. So we're meeting and talking every day. And the way the designers work is they will shift between products, depending on feature load or things like that. So what it does is it gives everyone an understanding of all the systems. So since they can bounce around, when someone brings an idea back or brings a problem back to the team, there's a good chance that someone else has an idea for that or has encountered it. And it's something that we can account for in the design system. So it shares the knowledge throughout the team. In that way, we can make things improved in the design system and account for these different things that aren't just in a silo, or like, build out something that may only affect one particular experience and then doesn't get accounted for. With us all working together, we make sure we get those accountabilities taken in, and we can document it for where it may come up elsewhere.
Yeah, super interesting to hear how the different teams manage these things. And I think to your point earlier, so much of it comes back to communication and getting that information and that flow of information from folks. Kind of pivoting back to working in healthcare, It's a highly regulated industry with lots of privacy laws, accessibility regulations, things like that. How has that affected how you and your teams build or implement design systems? Like, has it been difficult to balance the need to follow those laws and regulations with creating like easy to use, clear user interfaces for your end customers?
Yeah, I'll say user privacy is really the primary concern. I can think of there will be cases in a UI where you'll want to put together information in a way that accurately gives that user context or gives them the bigger picture, say like a policy owner that has several dependents on their healthcare plan. So in a lot of cases, we are not allowed to surface information about those other dependents on the plan. So the challenge becomes, how do I tell this user that they may have to find this information elsewhere in an easy and clear way? So the challenge becomes, understanding how to add context without personal data, because you have to do that in a way that doesn't create a busy word-filled UI that's got tooltips everywhere. You've got to find a way to do that, or that user will get lost, or worse yet, they abandon their task altogether. So it's working around that in ways that you have to give that information to them to get their task done. That may require a couple extra steps, and you have to do that in a way that is obviously as easy as possible and clear as possible, because as we've said, healthcare is it's inherently very complicated. So that really becomes the challenge.
Yeah, the biggest legal side for us is accessibility. I feel like our team, our design system, how we work with the like brand specifically and um, put brand to use in all of the resources that are delivered out to teams, whether it be design or development resources from us. That's our number one legal piece, even though that's also your number one design piece, right? Because you want to make sure that what you're giving them, that they're not going to have issues with it, right? There's not going to be anything come back on you. It's going to relieve time for testing and all those things that teams have to do for, those legal reasons. But also security. I think, this is personal answer from my team specifically and what we do. The main things that we would have to provide around any security thing is just components, I think like Cameron kind of said, that enable your team to do things in a secure manner if they need to, right? So if we have a reusable element or component like in a form field or something with masking, or like we said with tooltips, or how to guide with information, that we make those reusable experiences and components able to be secure, so that the design teams that are creating that have those resources in hand, rather than having to try to figure out on the development side how to do that on their own. So that's probably our biggest contribution from a security and accessibility standpoint.
Yeah, I would harp on accessibility as well, only because I think what's well documented out there, especially for designers, is like the visual lens. Like kind of like if you go at solving accessibility traps from a visual perspective, that's not even everything, right? There's, cognitive, accessibility issues, keyboard navigation, screen reader usage. So I think if you're wanting to be this enterprise solution for all of the organization, and lots of the user experience or product designers actually have done their work, they've done their research, they've, especially, accessibility engineers, when you speak to them, they're gonna have a long list of checklists for you. And it's like if you don't even know the basic level of accessibility, then you need to really brush up on that. Like that's not, it has to be your I think as designers, it would be not good that you don't know even a thing about accessibility. I feel like that's attached to design systems from now on. And then that's all, even for me, I think I always challenge myself with that. So if we could set up automation within teams and create a workflow that they can do those checks, that would be super helpful.
Yeah. I think that's where a tool like Supernova really comes in handy, because you can have your Figma set up just the way you need it. You've got everything from a design perspective documented there, but for accessibility, there's so much more to it. So having the content guidelines, other rules that you have to keep in mind around, contrast and things like that, having that in a place that is right next to the design component is really helpful.
For sure. And how do your teams measure the effectiveness and success of the design system? Like, are there specific metrics or KPIs that you all use to evaluate performance?
It's some of the things that we look at because, again, thinking of the fact that we're at the enterprise level, and that means that there's plenty of other teams who aren't just always saying, "Oh, we love your specific design system and we want to use it on everything," right? There's always someone who's kind of chiming in with, "Oh, maybe this is a different change, or maybe this is a different direction." And so we do always need executive champions, right? We need people to support us and to keep driving our design system through the enterprise as it grows. So some of the things that we always are kind of looking at is defects in the system, right? Anybody using it, what's the number of defects coming in each month? If there's any that are related specifically to components, reusable elements from our design system, making sure that we're keeping those low, and that we're also taking care of anything really quickly that does come in. Also, like number of pages that are using it, because again, and I don't know if it affects any of you all, but we're so big that even though we have an enterprise design system that we make available to everybody, does not mean that everybody is using it, does not mean that every page is created with it. So part of our job to try to advocate and get everybody to use it, but then the other part is to be able to show that, to say, this specific program or area wasn't using it, and here's the accessibility scores that came back for that. Here is these different mishaps or testing maybe that had to happen, extra things that had to be rebuilt, redone, that took extra time, versus programs that are using our specific design system. So it's not everything, but those are some key ones, because you want to show on our side that our specific system, our enterprise branded system, is the best for the company, and we try to get more and more programs and people and third parties utilizing it.
Yeah, I'll say the same thing I lead with saying. It's really, what's the adoption rate internally? You've got tools and teams that are maybe been on a legacy platform for years, and you need to modernize that, and you need to have your design system as an option for them and measure your just adoption rate as well as the companies using it. Are they using it throughout different areas that you may not have spoken with in the past, and being the advocate so that you can measure how it's rolling out through those other departments and areas that you may be, or teams you may be working with. I think another thing that's important to consider is, working with your insights or your research team to look at engagement rates, engagement metrics, benchmarking that against what it was before, looking at feature adoption. Did the transition to the design system improve those engagement metrics? That gives you insight into how well some of your patterns are working. So it kind of goes both ways there. So I think that's been really helpful as well.
From our team, I think I could only think of two things. What we've done last year is basically brainstorm on those things that we're trying to measure, and our hope was to set a baseline in the beginning of the year and kind of assign people to those metrics that are being measured, because not all of them is quantitative and in terms of measuring the metric, right? You could literally, I think one of the things that I'm a fan of PJ Honori, who hosts the Design Systems Office Hours podcast, and he would talk about, like, yeah, sure, there's always ways that you could measure this quantitatively, but what about the qualitative side of it? And he says you could do that tomorrow. Open your Slack and then message somebody and ask them how are you doing with our using our design system. Like, that's one way. I think from our side, there's definitely ways that our engineers can pull the data right now in terms of issues and all the defect tickets, like to Lee's point. But for me, you could open the support channel on our messaging, our chat app, and you'll see every day what those questions are. And I feel like if there's a way I could manually do that, put that on a spreadsheet, we could even create our own chart and see the data across the board. I'm very interested in that, but that's not something, we have automated today, but like very interested And I've looked into third-party apps that do the measuring of these metrics. Other than Figma, because Figma does have a library component, kind of like usage metric. So that's super helpful.
Yeah, it's become really helpful. We didn't always have that. We over the years got different metrics, different analytics, different teams supporting that on just, sites and pages, things like that, of course. But when we're starting to get them on our tools, it's become really helpful. And that's not, that's pretty recent, I would say. But in terms of engagement, people using, how many pages, how many defects per certain things coming in. So yeah, those things are definitely beneficial to where I don't have to take it all right and try to put it on an Excel sheet and make a graph out of it. It's actually kicking me out these things that really help us, number one, advocate for our system itself, and then two, also see where there are any pain points, right? And be able to quickly get to those.
For sure. Thank you all so much. We have a couple minutes left for audience questions. If anybody has any, please drop them in the Q&A. We don't have any right now, so I will go ahead and ask another question, which is, so far, I think we've talked a lot about how the design organization uses the design system and advocates for it. And we've kind of touched upon a couple of different cross-functional partners as well. I'm curious, what role have developers and engineers put in the design system, and do you all have, I guess, like engineering counterparts for your specific design systems?
Yep. So ours is a big one. So I'll just jump in. So I'll try to be really quick to getting into time. Ours is a big one because not only do we have the design system, right, a Figma design library over the years, Sketch, Figma, what we've had, that we have, like I said, reusable components, reusable experiences. We have a development team that works directly with my team for years now. That's all that they do pretty much. And creating reusable components that are same name, same look, feel, everything, interaction as our design elements in Figma, so that they're easily handed off to a development team, plug those in, tweaks here and there, and then put it out. So that's a big deal in terms of what we create, but it also creates a lot of stress, right? Because then, from a development standpoint, if your team not only holds the design, but holds the attributes, the components to develop, you're going to get a lot of, defects or feedback on that too. Oh, it could be easier, it could be this and that. So it's a big deal, but it's really important and it's really beneficial on top of all the stress of that to have them right alongside of us and be able to have those resources.
Yeah, it's very similar for us as well. We work closely we have platforms teams that manage the dev platform. So the leads from those teams work with the design system because, as Lee's saying, you may have certain cases where you've got code that's specific to a platform, specific to a different system, and the design system has to work within that. So, we've been able to work with those leads on those teams to make sure that our components and their components line up and everything is ready depending on what system you have to work in, because there are these things you have to account for. So it's really important for leads on both sides to keep those conversations going and to have that open line of communication as both of them are developing new things, because that's going to ultimately help you going forward.
We definitely work very closely with our engineering team. We have a dedicated engineering design system team as well. And we work with them every week. We have our touch points and stuff. And I think that one metric that stuck with me is that, this team, the engineering team actually is servicing 500 products in their code repo. So it's like, again, another signal that kind of shows you that this one team maintains all of those components for all the products and projects that's been worked on in the past. And that's just one side of, our business division. We have other brands that have other engineers, but this core team services the whole of the org. So yeah. They are bigger than the design team, I would say. And then we have a separate mobile native platform team. So our team is growing. But yeah, proud of the work that we've done together.
Love that. Question from Natalie. In a more digitized world, how do your design systems help accommodate users in rural areas that may have limited access to technology or high-speed connection?
So some of the things just quickly that we think about in terms of that, like, right, reaching more people is two things. When we think about web and such, load speeds, which is funny to think about, but like, what are you putting on your page? How much is it? How fast is it going to take to load, even with different cool interactions and new things? But how can you develop it to and build it the right way to be faster and be able to be handled in different situations? And then also mobile, even if everyone doesn't have internet in their house, or a computer, the amount of people that do have a mobile device is a much greater number and continuing to grow. So just making sure that everything we do is responsive, right? That we're still thinking accessible, we're still thinking navigation, consistency, brand, all of those things, but in much smaller screen sizes, as I'm sure everyone else on the panel thinks about too.
Anything you all want to add?
I think from
I think you said it well. Yeah, that here in Louisiana we have a lot of rural members, and it's interesting. You think about access, and really the mobile device becomes the primary point of access for a lot of those. We see a really high engagement rate for our mobile pages compared to desktop, which had in the insurance world that hasn't always been the case, and it tends to be a laggard. But here we've seen that really become important, and it really is. It drives home the fact that your design system has to be lean in a way that you have to rely on a certain few items that you can really put in place that can be used everywhere, and don't add a lot to the page speed, because there's no room for a megabyte CSS file.
Final question from Corey. Are you ever asked to provide metrics by which the design system and team can be evaluated within your larger organization?
Yeah, everyone wants dollar signs, right? So it's hard. Design's hard. One of the things from our area, this is a little off topic of this one, but it kind of fits, is I've always said, you got to be humble in this kind of work. It's not being a designer anymore. It really isn't. It is behind the scenes work. It's trying to help other people create and be great, right? So it's hard when you're doing that to try to provide metrics. But what we've done is try to provide those things to where what we are providing is accessible, right? The amount of defects, the amount of accessibility, things that come up on automated testing, the quickness that teams can qualitatively talk about in terms of their ability to build and design and be on brand. Those things, some of them you can't always get hard numbers, but a lot of them you can. So we've tried more and more to do that.
From the top of my head, I've been reading a lot about this. You could make a case about, again, designer and developer hours. That's, I would say, the most tangible, right? If you have developers having to maintain a button for that product, like, you could actually count the many components that one team has to maintain and compare that from a centralized perspective. We're taking away those development hours and maintenance time for the number of components that belong to that design build, whether it's a website or a product, right? If it comes from the design system, you can save those dollars of hiring, the people that has to do just that. So I think in terms of clarifying, right, what design systems are in different phases, adoption and, and all that stuff, I think one glaring metric would be how many developers do you have, or designers, even if there's a designer who supports the team, right? Who can help with that. I think that's also part of PJ's blog. I mean, I've been following PJ, and I just posted it in the chat. And this is what he talks about a lot.
Sure. Well, thank you all so much. We are exactly on time, so very timely here today. But thank you all so much, Krizia, Cameron, and Lee. Really appreciate all your insights and sharing your experiences. And thank you everyone for joining us, and have a good rest of your day and rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.